there is an aggressive push in America today toward medical fascism. Fascism is a system where corporations collude with government to dominate and control the population. Under the political fascism of Adolf Hitler, it was widely believed that no individual rights existed at all, and obedience to the state took priority over everything else, including human rights. It was with this philosophy that Nazi-era medical fascists justified the gassing to death of retarded people, the elderly, and the physically handicapped, saying that those people were, quote, parasites on the state and needed to be eliminated. The doctors of the Nazi era cheered the gassing as it was fully aligned with their belief in medical fascism. Today in America, the same brand of medical fascism is on the rise in the form of mandatory vaccinations. The same kind of doctors who once cheered the gassing to death of retarded and handicapped people in Germany are now calling for the arrest and imprisonment of parents in America who refuse to allow their children to be injected with toxic chemicals still used in vaccines, such as mercury, aluminum, MSG, and formaldehyde. What does modern-day medical fascism in America have in common with Nazi-era medical fascism? Doctors of both eras believed that you don't own your own body. And parents don't really have custody of their own children either. Instead, your body is owned by the state. And because the state owns your body, it can order you to do something to your body that you disagree with. Once this twisted philosophy infects a society, the march toward a medical holocaust only accelerates. From forced vaccinations, the next step is forced euthanasia of the elderly. This progresses to forced sterilizations of the mentally impaired. And before long, the very definition of, quote, mentally impaired is applied to anyone who disagrees with the government. Under the banner of science, eugenics and master race programs become embraced and even promoted by the state-run media. This leads to the justification of the mass killing of anyone deemed to be inferior by the state itself. Before long, the state is running mass extermination campaigns, corporate-engineered medical experiments on prisoners, and government-run death panels that decide who lives and who dies. This march of medical fascism is already underway in America. USA Today has called for the mass arrest and imprisonment of all vaccine resistors, calling for state authorities to seize children at gunpoint and throw parents in prison. Many doctors have already declared a medical jihad against their own patients, stating they will deny all health care to unvaccinated patients, preferring to see them die than allow them to receive care. Remember, this is all happening in a nation where the CDC and the White House insisted no medical quarantine was necessary for frontline healthcare workers directly exposed to Ebola patients in Africa. We were repeatedly told that quarantines should never be enforced against Ebola nurses and doctors because that would violate their freedom. But that same freedom is utterly abandoned when it comes to the forced vaccination of perfectly healthy children. Medical freedom is only invoked when it serves a political purpose. It is not something the government fundamentally believes in. Who owns your body? Every doctor, politician, or news reporter who calls for mandatory vaccinations today is mirroring the exact same philosophies that gave rise to eugenics, concentration camps, and the Holocaust of the Nazi era. It all stems from one of the most dangerous ideas ever conceived in history, that the state owns your body and can therefore decide what to do with it. If the state owns your body, then you have no say in medical interventions that involve your body. You must surrender total obedience of your physical body to the desires of the state, no matter how corrupt, wrong-headed, or fraudulently contrived those government desires may be. If the state owns your body and has the power to decide what to do with it, then the state also has the power to decide when to end it. How will the federal budget be balanced in the future? Very likely by cutting healthcare costs through forced euthanasia programs, also known as death panels. Under the system of death panels, the government decides when your life is no longer exploitable for its own profit. Once you stop working and stop paying taxes, you now become a retirement burden and a healthcare burden on the system. Under the idea that the state owns your body, it can therefore decide to terminate it at the point where you become what Adolf Hitler called a, quote, parasite on society. Hitler said that the elderly, the retarded, and the handicapped were holding back the rise of a great empire by forcing it to pay for their ongoing health care. The best way those individuals could serve the interests of the all-powerful state, scientists decided, was to terminate their lives. Thus, their deaths were ordered and carried out by doctors and scientists under the banner of evidence-based medicine. The press cheered the practice, and the Nazi regime went on to expand its power and tyranny across most of Europe and even into Russia. Millions died under the scientific system of eugenics, which stated that Jews were genetically inferior and therefore had to be exterminated for the so-called greater good. It is this call to sacrifice lives for the greater good that we now see reflected in the vaccine industry. In the rare instances when vaccine promoters admit that some children really are harmed or even killed by vaccines, such side effects are immediately justified by invoking the logic that it's all for the greater good of society, just like Adolf Hitler argued with the Holocaust. Nazi fascism was ultimately defeated, of course, but fascism is a relentless evil that incessantly tries to rise again. The tendency toward corporate government collusion must be resisted and held at bay with vigilance and dedication to fundamental human rights. Just as America helped defeat the Nazis of World War II, today all Americans who believe in human rights, parental rights, and freedom of choice must condemn those who try to march us down the path of medical fascism. We must demand the universal recognition of the right of an individual to control his or her own medical choices and those of his children. Anything less is a surrender to tyranny, and it is tolerance of the rise of medical fascism that will one day lead us right back to the mass killings and government murder that has already caused far too much suffering throughout human history. No system of medicine that demands your obedience at gunpoint can ever be trusted. No government that demands your compliance with toxic medical interventions should ever be allowed to stay in power. The next time you vote, vote for candidates who support medical choice for everyone. Freedom, after all, shouldn't exclude your very own body.